Congratulations. You're being reassigned to the humans, echoes, mockingly, as Lieutenant Arvest's fingers hover over the emergency override. Outside, asteroids pummel the ship, while a civilian transport bleeds oxygen. Alliance protocols demand retreat. Captain Reed demands action. In this heartbeat between duty and humanity, Arvest lowers her datapad, choosing lives over regulations, forever changing her destiny. The Galactic Alliance headquarters on Ordian Vive glistened with the cold efficiency that had become the hallmark of interstellar bureaucracy. Streams of data flowed through transparent conduits overhead, casting blue-green shadows across the immaculate corridors. Lieutenant Arvest Zell of the Siren Directorate moved with practiced precision through the maze of administrative departments, her steps as measured as her thoughts. Today marked her 1,000th standard cycle in service as a compliance liaison. 1,000 cycles without a single protocol violation, procedural discrepancy, or administrative error. Her superiors had noted this milestone with an automated commendation, delivered promptly at the start of her shift, precisely as regulations dictated. Arvest allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she activated her personal datapad. The device hummed to life with a soft blue glow, displaying her daily schedule, inspections, certifications, documentation reviews. The comfortable predictability of procedure stretched before her like a well-mapped star lane. Lieutenant Zell. The voice startled her. She turned to find Senior Administrator Vexel looking down at her, his four eyes blinking in their characteristic asynchronous pattern. Among the Siren hierarchy, unscheduled interactions were unusual enough to warrant concern. Senior Administrator, Arvest responded, instinctively straightening her already impeccable posture. I did not have you in my appointment queue for today. No, Vexel agreed, mandibles clicking slightly. This matter supersedes standard scheduling protocols. Please accompany me to Briefing Chamber 7 Alpha. As they walked, Arvest noticed subtle changes in the administrative hub's atmosphere. Small clusters of officials huddled in whispered conversation, dispersing as she and Vexel approached. Data streams overhead seemed to pulse with unusual intensity. Is there a compliance emergency, Senior Administrator? She ventured. Vexel's upper eyes narrowed. There is a situation, one requiring your specific talents. The briefing chamber door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss. 3 other high-ranking officials waited inside, their attention fixed on a holographic display hovering above the conference table. The projection showed a starship unlike any in the standard Alliance fleet, more angular, with oddly asymmetrical design elements. Lieutenant Zell, began Director Morix, the highest-ranking official present. What do you know about the Human Auxiliary Initiative? Arvest accessed her mental database. Project designation, HAI 2187. Experimental integration of human personnel into Alliance operations. Commenced 3 stellar cycles ago, following first contact protocols. Current status. Ongoing evaluation. Correct, but incomplete. Morix replied. The human integration has evolved. What began as a controlled observation has become a more comprehensive partnership. Humans now operate 17 vessels within Alliance space. Arvest blinked twice, the Siren equivalent of raised eyebrows. 17 vessels? Operating independently? Not independently, corrected another official. They function under Alliance mandate, but with considerable operational latitude. What the subdirector means, Vexel interjected, is that humans have been granted exceptions to certain Alliance operational standards. This statement caused a minor disruption in Arvest's thought process. Exceptions to standards were, by definition, contradictory to the concept of standards themselves. I see, she said, though she didn't. And how does this relate to my duties? Director Morix gestured to the holographic ship. This is the Resolute's Hand, flagship of Human Auxiliary Fleet 7. As of this moment, Lieutenant Zell, you are being reassigned as the official compliance liaison to this vessel. Arvest's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a physiological response she couldn't control. I don't understand. My current assignment cycle isn't scheduled for review for another 73 standard days. This reassignment carries priority classification Omega-9, Morix continued, sliding a physical credential chip across the table. You will depart for rendezvous with the Resolute's hand in 6 hours. 6 hours? Arvest repeated, her voice rising slightly. Regulation 375B stipulates a minimum transition period of 3 standard days for personnel reassignment. Hence the Omega-9 priority override, Vexil explained, with what might have been sympathy. Lieutenant, there are concerns about human operations. Their methods are proving effective, but they diverge significantly from Alliance protocols. Your task will be to observe, document, and report. Am I to enforce compliance? Arvest asked, relieved to find some familiar ground. The officials exchanged glances. You are to observe, Director Morix repeated carefully. Document irregularities. Yes. Submit reports through secure channels. But under no circumstances are you to interfere with human operational methods without direct authorization from Central Command. I don't understand, Arvest said again, genuine confusion rippling through her usually ordered thoughts. If there are compliance issues, the Directorate needs to understand these issues before determining corrective measures. Morix interrupted. The humans are unpredictable, but undeniably effective. Your mission is information gathering, Lieutenant. Nothing more. The meeting concluded with the transmission of a mission briefing to her datapad, a curiously sparse document compared to the exhaustive briefings she typically received. As Arvest left the chamber, she noticed her steps had lost their measured precision. 6 hours. She had 6 hours to prepare for an assignment of undefined duration, aboard a vessel operated by the most perplexing species to join the Alliance. Humans, the Deathworlders. Humans, whose homeworld's punishing gravity and atmospheric composition had shaped them into sturdy, adaptable beings. Humans, who had somehow progressed from primitive combustion technology to faster-than-light travel in less than 3 centuries. An evolutionary leap that had sent ripples of unease through the Alliance's more established members. Lieutenant Zell. Arvest turned to find Administrator Vexil had followed her from the chamber. Senior Administrator. Vexil glanced around, confirming they were alone in the corridor. This assignment, it wasn't random. Your record shows exceptional attention to detail and unwavering adherence to protocol. Thank you, sir. That wasn't entirely a compliment. Lieutenant, Vexil's mandibles clicked softly. Humans operate differently. They value what they call flexibility and intuition, concepts that may challenge your perspective. Arvest felt a flicker of indignation. Are you suggesting I'm incapable of adaptation, sir? I'm suggesting that this assignment may test you in ways you cannot anticipate. Vexil's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. The Directorate selected you because we need precise, unbiased documentation. But remember this: observation sometimes requires participation. With that cryptic statement, Vexil departed, leaving Arvest alone with her datapad and a growing sense of disquiet. Back in her quarters, Arvest initiated her standard pre-assignment protocol: research, preparation, equipment check. But the database entries on human operational methods were frustratingly vague, filled with footnotes about continuing assessment and case-by-case evaluation. The ship specifications for the Resolute's hand were equally confounding. The vessel appeared to be a modified Alliance cruiser, but with significant structural alterations that the schematics marked only as human adaptations. Most concerning was the crew manifest. Captain Jonas Reed, Chief Engineer Mara Voss, Gunnery Sergeant Lane Barrow, dozens of other human names, positions, and specializations, but no indication of their compliance history, procedural certifications, or regulatory training. Arvest's antennae twitched with nervous energy as she packed her belongings. Her entire career had been built on structure and certainty. Now she was being thrust into what appeared to be the antithesis of both. As the transport ship pulled away from Ordian V, Arvest watched the gleaming spires of bureaucracy recede into the distance. For the first time in 1,000 cycles of service, Lieutenant Arvest Zell was venturing into the unknown. The Resolute's hand was not what Arvest expected. From the exterior, as her transport approached, the vessel appeared imposing enough. A substantial cruiser-class ship with the distinctive angular hull design that humans seem to prefer. But, as the docking procedure initiated, she noticed irregularities. Certain hull plates didn't match in color or texture, suggesting replacements from non-standard sources. Some external sensor arrays had been repositioned in configurations that violated basic symmetry principles. "First time visiting a human ship?" asked the transport pilot, a Tralaxian whose gelatinous form rippled with amusement. "Is it that obvious?" Arvest replied, unable to tear her gaze from a particularly confounding modification, what appeared to be a manually painted identification number on the hull, complete with an inexplicable smiling face symbol next to it. "They're all like that," the pilot said. "Mismatched parts, weird decorations, modifications that would give any Alliance engineer a seizure. But they fly." "They fly," Arvest repeated, not entirely convinced this was sufficient qualification for an interstellar vessel. The docking procedure itself proceeded with unexpected smoothness, though Arvest noted the absence of the standard three-phase authentication protocol. Instead, a casual voice crackled over the comm. "Resolute's hand to transport shuttle. That you, Garcia? You're early for once." "Negative. Resolute," the pilot responded cheerfully. "Special delivery. Your new Alliance attaché?" A pause. Then, "Right. The compliance officer. Bringing her in now. Try not to scare this one off. Resolute out." "This one?" Arvest inquired, her antennae rigid with sudden concern. The pilot's gelatinous form quivered in what might have been a shrug. "You're not the first Alliance liaison assigned to a human vessel. Just the first to this particular ship." "And what happened to my predecessors?" "Oh, various things. Requested reassignment. Suffered unexpected nervous breakdowns. One apparently joined a spiritual commune on Proxima Centauri 4. The pilot guided the shuttle into the docking bay with practiced ease. "But I'm sure you'll be fine." The docking bay itself presented a new array of irregularities. Alliance regulations specified clean, unobstructed landing zones with precisely marked safety lines and equipment stations. The Resolute's hand. Bay featured none of these things. Instead, it was a hive of activity. Crew members moving cargo, mechanical components scattered in what appeared to be mid-repair, and most alarmingly, several small personal craft parked in configurations that violated at least 7 different spacing requirements. As Arvest descended from the shuttle, datapad already in hand to document these infractions, she was met by a human female whose red hair was bound in a style that defied both gravity and professional norms. "Lieutenant Zell, Mara Voss, Chief Engineer." The human extended a hand, a gesture Arvest recognized from her cultural briefings as a greeting ritual. Reluctantly, she accepted the handshake, noting with dismay that Voss's hand was covered in some dark, viscous substance. "Sorry about the grease," Voss said, noticing Arvest's discomfort. "We're in the middle of recalibrating the port thruster array. Bit of a rush job." "I see," Arvest replied, surreptitiously wiping her hand on her uniform. "Has this maintenance procedure been logged in accordance with Section 47B of the Alliance Engineering Code?" Voss blinked, then let out a sharp sound that Arvest recognized as laughter. "Oh, you really are a compliance officer, aren't you?" Come on. Captain Reed is waiting. He loves meeting new by-the-book types. The way Voss emphasized loves suggested the opposite might be true. As they navigated through the ship's corridors, Arvest's sense of professional dismay deepened. The Standard Alliance vessel maintained a clinical aesthetic, smooth surfaces, uniform lighting, clear directional indicators. The Resolute's hand had none of these things. Corridor walls bore evidence of multiple repairs, each seemingly executed with different materials. Overhead conduits were exposed in places, with handwritten labels affixed by what appeared to be adhesive tape. Most bewildering were the decorations, personal items, images, and text messages displayed outside crew quarters. "Is this art?" Arvest asked, pausing before a particularly vibrant display outside one cabin. "That's Kowalski's door. She collects cultural artifacts from every world we visit. Captain says it builds morale." Voss shrugged. "Regulation 133C about personalization of common areas, right? I think Reed filed for an exemption. Or maybe he didn't. Hard to keep track." The casual dismissal of regulatory requirements sent a shiver down Arvest's spine. She made a note on her datapad, the first of what promised to be many. The bridge of the Resolute's hand presented a new level of irregularity. While the basic layout conformed to Alliance design, central command station, navigation and weapons consoles, communications array, the implementation was chaotic by Siren standards. Some stations had been reconfigured with non-standard equipment. Display screens showed information in formats Arvest didn't recognize. Most distressingly, several crew members were consuming beverages at their posts, a clear violation of Safety Protocol 22A. At the center of this controlled chaos stood a human male whose bearing suggested authority. He turned as Voss and Arvest entered, revealing a face adorned with facial hair, a beard. Arvest recalled from her briefings. This was presumably Captain Jonas Reed. "Lieutenant Zell, I presume." Reed's voice matched the one from the comm, casual, confident, with a subtle undercurrent of amusement. "Welcome aboard the Resolute's hand. I'd offer you the grand tour, but Mara tells me we've got a thruster issue to resolve before we can make our next jump." "Captain Reed," Arvest acknowledged with a formal siren gesture of respect. "I appreciate your welcome. Perhaps while the engineering team addresses the thruster malfunction, we could review the ship's compliance status." Reed exchanged a glance with Voss that Arvest couldn't interpret. "Sure, why not? Though I should warn you, we've got a unique interpretation of Alliance guidelines aboard this vessel." "Regulations aren't generally subject to interpretation, Captain," Arvest pointed out, antenna stiffening slightly. "Everything's subject to interpretation out here, Lieutenant," Reed replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mara, how long on that thruster?" 2 hours, maybe 3, Voss replied. "Depends on whether Riz's patch job holds this time." "Who is Riz?" Arvest asked. "I don't recall seeing that name on the crew manifest." "Rizwan Chaudhry, assistant engineer," Reed explained. "But everyone calls him Riz. You'll find we're informal with names here. Lieutenant. Speaking of which, what do your friends call you?" The question caught Arvest off guard. "My friends. You know, your social associates, the people you spend recreational time with," Reed prompted. "I am generally addressed by my rank and family designation," Arvest replied stiffly. "Right," Reed nodded, as if this confirmed something. "Well, Lieutenant Zell it is. Let me find someone to show you to your quarters while I deal with this thruster situation." He activated a comm unit on his wrist. "Brick, you free? Our new Alliance liaison has arrived. Need you to show her around. Get her settled." A gruff voice responded, "On my way, Cap." Moments later, the bridge door slid open to reveal one of the largest humans Arvest had ever seen. The newcomer's frame nearly filled the doorway, muscular bulk emphasized by the non-regulation combat armor he wore. "Lieutenant Zell, meet Gunnery Sergeant Lane Barrow." Reed introduced. Everyone calls him Brick. A reference to my conversational skills, not my intellectual capacity, Barrow clarified, extending a hand that seemed capable of crushing Arvest's delicate siren bones. Welcome aboard, Lieutenant. Arvest accepted the handshake with trepidation. Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant Barrow. Brick, he corrected. Only my mother and official reprimands call me Barrow. As Barrow led her from the bridge, Arvest heard Reed call after them. Meeting in the mess hall at 1800 hours. Lieutenant, we'll go over your compliance concerns then. The way he said compliance concerns suggested this was not a priority for the captain. Arvest added another note to her rapidly filling datapad. Barrow's tour of the Resolute's hand did nothing to alleviate Arvest's growing anxiety. Every section of the ship revealed new violations of Alliance standards, from the haphazard organization of the medical bay. Dr. Joe likes to arrange things by how often he needs them, not by regulation, to the modified weapon systems. Standard issue was too slow, so we upgraded. Most concerning was the engine room, where Chief Engineer Voss presided over a team engaged in what appeared to be significant modifications to crucial systems. Is that approved Alliance technology? Arvest asked, pointing to a component that pulsed with an unfamiliar energy signature. Depends on your definition of approved, Voss replied, without looking up from her work. We submitted the design to Alliance Engineering. They're still reviewing it. Meanwhile, we needed it operational, so you installed experimental technology without authorization, Arvest concluded, adding yet another note to her datapad. We installed a solution to a problem, Voss corrected. That's what we do here. Lieutenant, we solve problems. Regulations exist to prevent problems before they occur, Arvest countered. Voss finally looked up, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. With all due respect, Lieutenant, regulations are written by people who've never had to keep a ship running while under fire in an ionic storm. Out here, we adapt or we die. The stark assessment silenced Arvest momentarily. Her species valued survival, of course, but the idea of placing immediate survival above systematic procedure seemed fundamentally flawed. How could one ensure long-term viability without adherence to tested protocols? Her quarters, at least, offered some respite from the chaos. Though smaller than Alliance standards specified for an officer of her rank, the room was clean and contained the basic necessities. Barrow left her to settle in with a casual, "Mess hall's 2 decks down if you get hungry. Can't miss it. Just follow the noise." Alone at last, Arvest sat on the edge of the berth and reviewed the notes she'd collected. The list of infractions was extensive enough to justify immediate intervention under normal circumstances. But Director Morix's instructions had been clear. Observe and document only. No interference without explicit authorization. The restriction chafed. Every moment aboard this vessel represented continued operation outside Alliance standards. Standards designed to ensure safety, efficiency, and predictable outcomes. How could she witness such flagrant disregard for procedure without taking corrective action? With a sense of professional duty, Arvest began composing her first report to Alliance Command. The document grew quickly as she detailed each observed violation, categorized by severity and potential impact. By the time she'd finished, the report ran to 17 pages, and she'd been aboard less than 6 hours. The mess hall meeting did nothing to improve Arvest's assessment of the Resolute's hand. Operations. Captain Reed had gathered his senior officers around a table littered with food containers, datapads, and what appeared to be playing cards from some recreational activity, interrupted by the meeting. "All right, people," Reed began without preamble as Arvest took a seat. "As you've probably heard, Lieutenant Zell here is our new Alliance liaison. She'll be observing our operations and reporting back to the bureaucrats on Ordian V." The announcement elicited various reactions from the assembled humans. A few nods, some rolled eyes, One audible groan. "I understand my presence may be disruptive," Arvest ventured. "But I assure you, my goal is simply to document operations for Alliance review." "Sure it is," muttered a human with dark skin and close-cropped hair, whom Arvest recognized from the manifest as Tactical Officer Liam Okafor. "Something to add, Lieutenant Okafor?" Reed asked, his tone suggesting careful territory. Okafor straightened. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "When have you ever waited for permission?" Reed replied, but gestured for him to continue. "With respect to our guest," Okafor said, fixing Arvest with a direct gaze. "We've done this dance before. Alliance sends an observer. Observer has a meltdown about how we don't follow their precious regulations. Observer files a report recommending we be decommissioned. Nothing changes except we waste time entertaining another bureaucrat." The blunt assessment hung in the air. Arvest's antennae quivered with indignation. "I assure you, Lieutenant Okafor, I have no predetermined conclusions," she replied stiffly. "My assignment is to observe and document. Nothing more." "Uh-huh," Okafor nodded skeptically. "Just like the last one. Right up until we had to make a combat decision. And suddenly it was all, 'This violates procedure, and I must insist you withdraw immediately.'" Captain Reed raised a hand. "That's enough. Okafor. Lieutenant Zell isn't responsible for her predecessor's actions." He turned to Arvest. "But you should understand the context. This ship has completed 17 missions for the Alliance. Missions that other vessels couldn't or wouldn't take on. Our methods may not align with Alliance protocols, but our results speak for themselves." "Results aren't everything, Captain," Arvest countered. "Procedures exist to ensure consistent outcomes and minimize risk." "With respect, Lieutenant," interjected a slender human female, whom Arvest identified as Navigation Officer Priya Sharma. "Out here, risk is a constant. We can't eliminate it. We can only respond to it. Sometimes that means improvising." "Improvisation leads to unpredictable outcomes," Arvest pointed out. "Life leads to unpredictable outcomes," countered Chief Engineer Voss. "Regulations can't account for every scenario we encounter." The debate continued in this vein, with various officers defending their unorthodox methods, while Arvest attempted to articulate the value of standardized procedures. Throughout the exchange, Captain Reed observed silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he raised a hand again, silencing the discussion. "I think we've established our philosophical differences. Lieutenant Zell, you have a job to do, and so do we. I won't interfere with your observations, and I expect you won't interfere with our operations. Fair?" Arvest hesitated, then nodded. "As per my directive from Alliance Command, I am here to observe only—" "Good," Reed said, rising from his seat. "Then, if there's nothing else, we have a mission to prepare for. We ship out at 0600 tomorrow for the Kepler sector. Standard patrol and supply run to the outer colonies." As the meeting dispersed, Arvest found herself approached by the ship's medical officer, a human with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes. "Dr. Franklin Joe," he introduced himself. "First time working with humans, Lieutenant?" "Is it that obvious?" Arvest asked, echoing her earlier question to the transport pilot. Dr. Joe smiled. "You have the look of someone encountering a new pathogen, fascinated and horrified in equal measure." The analogy was uncomfortably apt. "Your crew operates differently than I'm accustomed to. Humans adapt," Joe said simply. "It's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We see a problem. We find a solution, often messy, rarely elegant, but usually effective." He paused. "The Alliance values order, and there's merit in that, but sometimes progress requires a little chaos." With that philosophical observation, he too departed, leaving Arvest alone in the mess hall with her datapad and a growing sense that her assignment would be even more challenging than anticipated. The following days, aboard the Resolute's Hand, did nothing to alleviate Arvest's concerns. The ship departed for the Kepler sector as scheduled, but the journey immediately presented new irregularities for her to document. The navigation protocols ignored standard Alliance spatial mapping in favor of what Lieutenant Sharma described as intuitive routing, essentially plotting courses, based on the navigator's experience rather than centralized data. The communication systems had been modified to include what humans called back-channel frequencies, operating outside the Alliance's monitored network. Most alarmingly, the crew conducted emergency drills without following proper sequence or documentation. When Arvest pointed this out to Barrow, who oversaw the security team's readiness training, he merely shrugged. "Alliance drills are designed for Alliance enemies," he explained. "We've encountered things out here that don't play by those rules, so neither do we." "What things?" Arvest inquired, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her regulatory concerns. Barrow's expression darkened. "Things the bureaucrats on Ordian V don't have classification codes for yet. Ask Captain Reed if you want details. He's got the clearance to tell you, if he thinks you should know." This cryptic response prompted Arvest to seek out the captain, whom she found in the ship's rarely used observation deck, staring out at the streaking lights of hyperspace. "Captain Reed," she began formally, "I have questions about your security protocols." Reed didn't turn from the viewport. "I bet you do. Let me guess, too many deviations from standard procedure?" Gunnery Sergeant Barrow implied that these deviations are responses to encounters not cataloged by Alliance Xenobiology or Threat Assessment Divisions. Arvest pressed. "If there are unknown entities in Alliance space, proper documentation and reporting is essential." Now, Reed did turn, his expression serious. "Lieutenant, there's a reason human vessels are patrolling the frontier sectors. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our evolutionary history. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. Earth shaped humans to expect the unexpected and adapt accordingly." "I don't see how this relates to Alliance reporting protocols," Arvest said, her antennae twitching with confusion. "It relates because the Alliance isn't built for rapid adaptation," Reed replied. "By the time a new threat is officially classified, documented, and incorporated into regulations, people die. Ships are lost. We don't have time to wait for bureaucratic processes when we're face to face with something trying to eat us." "So you simply ignore established procedure?" "We modify it to fit reality," Reed corrected. "Look, I understand your position. Rules create order. Order creates safety. But out here on the edge, sometimes the rules are just too slow." The conversation left Arvest deeply troubled. The captain's perspective wasn't entirely without merit. The Alliance bureaucracy did move deliberately, prioritizing thorough analysis over speed. But the idea that field personnel should have the authority to simply disregard procedures based on their subjective assessment seemed dangerously chaotic. Her concerns only deepened when, 2 days into the journey, Chief Engineer Voss initiated an unscheduled power redistribution that caused momentary system fluctuations throughout the ship. "What exactly are you doing?" Arvest demanded, finding Voss elbow-deep in an open access panel near the engine core. "Rerouting power to boost shield capacity," Voss replied, without looking up. "This sector's had reports of unusual radiation bursts. Standard shields might not be sufficient." "There's no mention of radiation hazards in the mission briefing," Arvest pointed out. "Official briefing, no," Voss agreed. "But I've got friends on the Intrepid. They passed through here last week, picked up readings that weren't in any Alliance database. Better safe than sorry." "You're modifying crucial systems based on unofficial information?" Arvest couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. Voss finally looked up, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "I'm protecting the ship and crew based on the best available information. Would you prefer I ignore a potential threat because it hasn't been officially documented yet?" "Put that way, The engineer's actions were harder to condemn. Still, Arvest dutifully recorded the incident in her growing report, categorizing it under unauthorized modifications, potential safety implications. By the end of the first week, Arvest had documented 347 distinct violations of Alliance regulations, ranging from minor infractions, improper uniform elements, to major concerns, weapon systems operating outside approved parameters. Yet, despite this apparent disregard for procedure, the ship functioned with surprising efficiency. The crew worked together seamlessly, often communicating through what seemed like incomplete sentences and casual gestures, rather than the standardized command protocols Alliance vessels employed. They anticipated problems before they arose and implemented solutions with minimal discussion. It was, Arvest had to admit, impressively effective, if utterly unorthodox. Her opportunity to observe human crisis response came sooner than expected, 8 days into the mission. As the Resolute's hand approached the outer colony on Kepler 22b, an emergency transmission cut through the routine bridge chatter. "Repeat, this is civilian transport, Horizon Dawn, requesting immediate assistance. We've encountered an uncharted asteroid field and sustained damage to our navigation systems. Multiple injuries reported. Any Alliance vessel, please respond." Captain Reed was on his feet immediately. "Sharma, get me their coordinates. Okafor, battle stations. Voss, I need maximum engine output." The bridge erupted into activity. Arvest stood frozen, datapad clutched in one hand, as the calm, casual atmosphere transformed into focused intensity. "Lieutenant Zell," Reed addressed her directly, "you might want to strap in. This could get interesting." Arvest found herself guided to an auxiliary seat as the crew prepared for emergency response. Her training prompted her to access the Alliance Emergency Protocols database on her datapad, searching for the appropriate procedure for asteroid field rescue operations. Section 183C, Civilian Vessel Distress Response. She read aloud. Step 1. Establish communication and verify distress authenticity. "Already confirmed," Reed replied tersely. "They're broadcasting on an Alliance emergency frequency with proper identification codes." Step 2. Assess hazard level and determine appropriate intervention strategy. Arvest continued. "Working on it," Okafor called from his station, where sensor data streamed across his display. "Asteroid field density looks high. Irregular movement patterns, possibly influenced by gravimetric anomalies in the sector." Step 3. If hazard level exceeds safety parameters, request additional support and maintain position at safe distance until— "No time," Reed interrupted. "That transport is already in the field. They've lost navigation and propulsion. We go in now, or we recover bodies later." Arvest's antennae stiffened in alarm. "Captain, Alliance regulations clearly state that vessels should not enter uncharted asteroid fields without proper survey and risk assessment." Reed fixed her with an intense gaze. "Lieutenant, there are 112 civilians on that transport, including 27 children. Standard Alliance response time to this sector is 3 hours minimum. In 3 hours, that ship will be crushed." "But the regulations—" "Will get those people killed," Reed finished. "Now, you can document whatever violations you need to, but we're going in." Before Arvest could formulate a response, the ship lurched forward, accelerating toward the swirling mass of asteroids visible on the main view screen. Her datapad flashed a series of warning messages as the ship's automated compliance systems registered multiple protocol violations. "Approaching asteroid field perimeter," Sharma announced from the navigation station. "Conventional plotting systems are struggling with the irregular movement patterns." "Switch to manual control," Reed ordered. "Okafor, I need continuous updates on those gravitational anomalies. Voss, how are the shields holding?" "I've rerouted additional power." The chief engineer's voice came over the comm. "But we're not designed for sustained impacts. One big hit in the wrong place will still cause significant damage." Reed nodded. Understood. Sharma, find us a path to that transport. Barrow, prep a rescue team. We may need to evacuate the Horizon Dawn if their hull integrity is compromised. Arvest watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the Resolute's hand entered the asteroid field. Alliance training simulations had covered similar scenarios, always with the same conclusion. Uncharted asteroid fields presented unacceptable risk levels. The proper procedure was clear: maintain safe distance, dispatch unmanned probes to establish safe corridors, and wait for specialized rescue vessels if civilian craft were involved. Yet, here was Captain Reed, deliberately piloting his ship into danger. His crew working with practiced coordination that suggested they'd done this before. "Incoming!" Okafor shouted as a massive asteroid tumbled toward them. Its trajectory suddenly altered by an invisible gravitational eddy. Sharma's hands flew across her console, and the ship banked sharply, missing the rocky mass by meters. The maneuver sent Arvest pressing against her restraints, her datapad clattering to the deck. "Nice move," Reed commended. "Distance to Horizon Dawn?" "Approximately 7 kilometers," Sharma responded. "But the path is challenging." The view screen showed what challenging meant: a chaotic maze of tumbling rocks, ranging from car-sized chunks to massive city-block asteroids, all moving in unpredictable patterns. Arvest retrieved her datapad, hands trembling slightly. The ship's compliance system was now registering critical violations, including deliberate navigation into certified hazard zone and unauthorized risk assessment override. "Captain," she tried again, "Alliance protocols exist for a reason. The risk assessment matrix clearly indicates—" "Lieutenant," Reed interrupted without taking his eyes from the view screen. "I respect your position, but right now I need you to observe quietly. Those people need help, and we're the only ones who can provide it in time." "But do you know why they call these Death World or Intuition missions, Lieutenant?" Reed asked. His voice suddenly calm despite the chaos surrounding them. Arvest blinked in confusion. "I'm not familiar with that designation." "It's what the Alliance High Command calls these frontier patrols," Reed explained, as the ship dodged another asteroid. "They send humans because we evolved on a planet that taught us to expect danger around every corner. We developed instincts for survival that most Alliance species never needed." A tremendous impact shook the ship, causing warning lights to flash across multiple stations. "Port shield at 60%, Voss reported over the comm. "Rerouting power to compensate." Reed nodded acknowledgement. The Alliance needed explorers willing to take risks, make split-second decisions without committees or protocols. That's us, Lieutenant. That's what humans bring to the table. As he spoke, Arvest began to perceive the patterns in what had initially seemed like chaos. Reed wasn't navigating randomly. He was anticipating the asteroid movements, reacting to subtle gravitational indicators that the ship's sensors could barely detect. It was as though he could feel the flow of space around them. "Visual contact with Horizon Dawn," Okafor announced. "She's wedged between 2 large asteroids. Hull breach detected in their aft section." "Life signs?" Reed demanded. "Multiple readings, concentrated in the forward compartments. They must have sealed the bulkheads to contain the breach." Reed's expression hardened with determination. "Sharma, get us alongside their emergency airlock. Barrow, prepare for immediate evacuation." "Captain," Arvest interjected, unable to remain silent. "Standard evacuation protocols require—" "Lieutenant," Reed cut her off, his patience visibly thinning. "I value your dedication to procedure, but right now, those procedures will get people killed. Trust the crew's gut. We learn by doing." The phrase echoed Administrator Vexel's parting words. Observation sometimes requires participation. As the Resolute's hand maneuvered through the final stretch of asteroids toward the stricken transport, Arvest found herself torn between her training and the reality before her. The crew's actions violated dozens of regulations, yet they were clearly the transport's only hope for survival. Her datapad contained an emergency override code, a last resort measure allowing Alliance liaisons to assume command in extreme circumstances. Her finger hovered over the activation sequence as the ship shuddered under another glancing impact from a passing asteroid. "Contact in 30 seconds, Sharma announced, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "Barrow, status?" Reed demanded. "Rescue team in position at airlock. Medical standing by for casualties." Arvest's hand trembled over the override code. By all Alliance risk metrics, this operation exceeded acceptable parameters. The protocol was clear. Abort mission, retreat to safe distance, request specialized assistance. But as she looked up at the view screen, at the damaged transport, and the desperate faces visible through its viewport, Arvest knew that protocol would condemn those people to death. With a decisive motion, she lowered her datapad. "Captain Reed," she said formally, "I am logging my observation of this rescue attempt and withholding emergency override at this time." Reed glanced at her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Noted, Lieutenant. Now hold on tight. This next part gets tricky." The tricky part, as it turned out, involved navigating the Resolute's hand between two massive asteroids in an intricate docking procedure that Alliance manuals would have deemed impossible. Yet somehow, through a combination of Sharma's piloting skills, Voss's continuous power adjustments, and Reed's intuitive command decisions, they succeeded. The rescue operation itself was equally unorthodox. Rather than following the step-by-step evacuation procedures outlined in Alliance manuals, Barrow's team adapted to the transport's unusual damage pattern, establishing multiple transfer points and prioritizing evacuees based on rapid assessment rather than standardized triage protocols. Throughout the operation, Arvest observed, documented, and, increasingly, participated. When communication systems faltered due to interference from the asteroids, she applied her knowledge of siren signal modulation techniques to establish a more stable connection. When evacuation paths became blocked by structural damage, she helped devise alternative routes based on her understanding of civilian transport schematics. It was chaotic, improvisational, and utterly contrary to her training. It was also undeniably effective. 3 hours later, with the Horizon Dawn's crew and passengers safely aboard, and the Resolute's hand clear of the asteroid field, Arvest found herself in the ship's medical bay, assisting Dr. Zhou with treating the injured. "Pass the quantum entanglement reader," Zhou requested, gesturing toward a device that bore little resemblance to standard Alliance medical equipment. Arvest handed it to him, noting, "That's not an approved diagnostic tool." "Designed it myself," Zhou replied, without looking up from his patient. "Combines 3 separate Alliance tools into one, with better resolution and faster results." He glanced up briefly. "I submitted the design to Alliance Medical 4 years ago. Still under review. The approval process ensures safety and efficacy," Arvest pointed out, though with less conviction than she might have mustered a day earlier. "And bureaucracy ensures delays," Zhou countered, using the device to scan a child's broken arm. "This boy's bone is setting incorrectly. With standard Alliance equipment, I might not have detected that until permanent damage was done." Arvest couldn't argue with the results. Throughout the ship, she'd witnessed similar scenarios, human modifications and adaptations proving their worth in crisis. Captain Reed's Death Worlder intuition had navigated an impossible asteroid field. Engineer Voss's unauthorized shield modifications had protected them from impacts that standard configurations couldn't have withstood. Barrow's flexible evacuation protocols had saved lives that might have been lost while waiting for proper procedures. Later, alone in her quarters, Arvest confronted the implications of her observations. Her datapad contained documentation of hundreds of Alliance regulation violations. By any standard compliance metric, the Resolute's hand should be immediately recalled for review, and its command staff potentially relieved of duty. Yet the same datapad contained evidence of the crew's extraordinary effectiveness. The successful rescue operation, the innovative solutions to unpredictable challenges, the lives saved through what Reed had called human adaptability. With a sense of professional crisis, Arvest began composing her report to Alliance Command. Her fingers hovered over the datapad as she considered her words carefully. Assessment of Human Auxiliary Fleet 7, Starship Resolute's hand, she began, then paused. How could she reconcile what she'd observed with what her training told her was correct? The Alliance valued order, predictability, measurable outcomes. The humans of the Resolute's hand operated in what appeared to be controlled chaos, guided by intuition and experience rather than established protocols. Yet their results were undeniable. After several false starts, Arvest set aside her formal report template and began again, this time with a more personal approach. During my observation period aboard the human vessel, Resolute's hand, I have documented numerous departures from Alliance standard operating procedures. These departures range from minor administrative irregularities to significant tactical and operational modifications. However, I must also report that these modifications have demonstrably enhanced the vessel's effectiveness in fulfilling its mission parameters, particularly in crisis response scenarios where standard protocols may prove insufficient due to time constraints or unusual circumstances. The human crew's ability to adapt to unpredictable situations while maintaining core mission objectives represents a capability the Alliance would be remiss to dismiss on purely procedural grounds. Therefore, I recommend continued integration of human operational methodologies into Alliance frontier operations, with the following caveat: Alliance observation and documentation should continue, not with the goal of enforcing compliance, but of understanding and potentially incorporating human adaptive techniques into future Alliance protocols. In essence, observe, do not interrupt. Arvest reviewed her report with a sense of professional heresy. It contradicted much of her training and violated several principles of compliance assessment she had long held sacred. Yet it also reflected the reality she had witnessed, a reality where rigid adherence to procedure sometimes created more problems than it solved. With a decision that felt momentous, she authorized the report and transmitted it to Alliance Command. Whatever the consequences to her career, she had documented the truth as she observed it. The following morning, Arvest found herself in the ship's mess hall, surrounded by the now familiar controlled chaos of the human crew. Captain Reed approached, sliding into the seat across from her with a steaming mug of what humans called coffee. "Lieutenant," he greeted her, "I hear you've submitted your first report to command." Arvest's antennae twitched in surprise. "How did you—" "Ship's communications officer mentioned an encrypted transmission to Ordian V," Reed explained, with a slight smile. "Don't worry, we didn't hack it. Alliance encryption is mostly secure." The implication that they could have intercepted her report if they'd wanted to was both alarming and somehow unsurprising. "I reported my observations accurately," Arvest said carefully. "I'm sure you did," Reed nodded. "And I'm sure it included a comprehensive list of our regulation violations. The question is, what recommendation did you make?" Before Arvest could respond, Barrow appeared at their table, carrying a plate laden with an irregular-shaped food item. "Victory cake," he announced, setting it down between them. "Kowalski baked it last night to celebrate the rescue. Some of the kids from the transport helped decorate it, hence the, creative appearance." The cake resembled no Alliance-approved nutritional substance Arvest had ever encountered. Its surface was uneven, covered in colorful substances, arranged in patterns that might charitably be called artistic. "I don't typically consume non-standard nutritional items," Arvest began hesitantly. It's just cake, Lieutenant, Reed said, cutting a slice and placing it before her. A little celebration of a job well done. No regulations against that, I hope. In fact, there were several regulations governing consumption of non-standardized food items aboard Alliance vessels. But Arvest found herself disinclined to mention them. What did you recommend in your report? Reed asked again, his tone conversational but his eyes intent. Arvest considered the question, then the cake before her. Both represented a departure from her usual patterns, one professional, one personal. Both required a willingness to adapt, to consider that perhaps there were valid alternatives to established procedures. I recommended that the Alliance continue to observe human operational methods, she said finally, without interference. Reed's eyebrows rose slightly. That's not what I expected. Nor I, Arvest admitted. But it reflects my observations. Your methods are unorthodox, potentially hazardous, and frequently in violation of established protocols. They are also, in certain circumstances, demonstrably superior to Alliance standard procedures. A slow smile spread across Reed's face. High praise from a compliance officer. Not praise, Arvest corrected. Observation, the objective of my assignment. With a deliberate motion, she picked up the utensil provided and cut a small piece from the cake before her. The act felt symbolically significant, a small step outside the boundaries of her usual behavior. The flavor was startling, sweet and complex. Nothing like the bland nutritional supplements that formed the standard Alliance diet. It was chaotic and unpredictable, like the humans themselves. I believe, Arvest said slowly, that Administrator Vexil was correct. Observation sometimes requires participation. To participation, then, Reed raised his coffee mug in what Arvest recognized as a toast, and to finding a balance between your order and our chaos. As the mess hall hummed with the energetic conversations of the human crew, planning, arguing, laughing, living, Arvest felt something shift in her perception. The chaos around her no longer seemed threatening, merely different. A different approach to the same fundamental goals: survival, progress, cooperation. Perhaps there was room in the orderly Galactic Alliance for a little human disorder after all. Arvest took another bite of the irregular, non-regulation, surprisingly delicious cake. Balance, indeed.